Good evening and welcome to the House of the Empire. I am Johnny V. I'm going to be taking over hosting tonight. Um, we got a great show. We got a great episode this week. We got a lot of stuff to talk about. And of course, we're going to break down the third episode of A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. Joining me tonight, as always, my usual co-host, colleagues, and friends. Randy, how you doing tonight?
Not doing too bad. It was a typical Monday at work. Obviously, still getting for us down here, still getting having a lot of ice and having to deal with that. I know for you guys, it's par for the course when it comes to winter, but in Virginia, not so much. So it's been fun for the past basically week and a half. But yeah, I'm excited. I watched the episode earlier tonight. I really enjoyed it, and I can't wait to talk about it.
And of course, down here at the bottom of the screen, Sean, how you doing?
I'm doing as well as I can, man. Another episode in the books, and just like that, this little shortened season is halfway over. Still also trying to stop laughing and regain feeling in my chest after that Seinfeld Royal Rumble meme you sent me.
Thank you. It was a good one. Created by me too, by the way. All original.
Oh, even
Yeah,
better then.
yeah. I tried to post it in one of the Seinfeld wrestling meme groups that didn't get posted. I guess it was too good for them. Oh yes, no, it's great weekend in the book, the Royal Rumble. We're not talking about that tonight. We don't have enough time. Um, but yeah, Night of the Seven Kingdoms episode 3 is in the books. We're going to start off obviously without spoilers, and then we'll get down to the nitty gritty and talk about the episode without guardrails. Randy, third episode. What did you think?
So it definitely picked up for me from the last episode, which is always a good thing. Obviously, I liked how we definitely are setting up the second half of the season. I felt like the pacing was good, and we got a lot more that it just felt like I wouldn't say upbeat, but it just felt good, and I felt like there was a lot of good character development, and we got to see more of just what people, who people are versus what you assume they should be. And it was just all around fun episode, and I'm really glad that some of the comments and suggestions I made last week kind of came to fruition this week. So it was really nice.
I think Johnny might have
I'm enjoying a
got
battle with
sent
the
to the
mute
wall.
monster. I did. Sean, what about you? What did you think?
Um, I wish I could come on here and say that it, woed me and was amazing, and that it really amped things up. I It's a mixed bag for me. It doesn't mean that it's bad. And I talked with our buddy Zach today. He'll be back next week. And we had different feelings on it. But it's a mixed bag for me. The first half is just honestly kind of filler, fellas. There's a lot of kind of pointless crap throughout the first half of the episode, and these episodes are short enough as it is. Again, this is why I say I don't know if Dan and David with Game of Thrones or Ryan Condal with House of the Dragon get enough credit for just how much content they add on top of the source material into Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon. Both shows are wildly successful. And this show's been very successful too, by the way, number wise and rating wise so far. But it's a mixed bag for me. Again, the first half is just kind of blah, and I don't know who wouldn't like the second half of the episode because it was fantastic, but mixed bag.
I think for me, it was probably my favorite so far. But I think that's because it was very clearly a table setter. It did a much better job of clarifying the stakes, as it were, for what is actually going on. You of course get the huge revelation at the end, which we'll talk about later, and all those things go into it. But like for me, I think the one thing that I take away most from this episode is that finally it is an episode without a cheap, stupid gag. Like
You must have fell asleep for 30 seconds then.
I don't know which part you're referring to.
The horse shitting. It very much felt
the difference between that and the other two is a horse shitting in the pasture is. I'd expect to see that. Like I'm pretty sure we saw that many times in Game of Thrones.
The camera angle was the most neutral, front and center, nothing creative about it, and we're just gonna have a horse shitting. For me, it falls in there with the first two, and I'm betting we're gonna have something like that in every single episode.
It does. I won't argue against that point, but for me, it felt the most unobnoxious, I guess you could say.
I'll agree with that.
Like obviously the first one was just, and last week's was so in your face that it just, whereas this one at least felt natural in a sort of way. Like it didn't. I feel like we're spending way too much time talking about horse shit. But it felt more normalized compared to some of the other gags we've gotten. It still falls under that category, but it's the least egregious of the three so far. So let's move forward. Let's start breaking down. So if you haven't watched it yet, pause, go watch it, then come back. If you have watched it, let us know what you think in the comments down below, or if you're watching it live, let us know now. But spoilers, like what did you think? Like what let's break down the episode. Obviously, we're not gonna go too intrinsically into full-on stuff. So let's we'll go around the table and each of us will sort of bring up one part of the episode we want to, jump into and dive into as far as spoiler goes. Then we'll keep going. So, Sean, we'll start with you.
We're all going to have the same one. I
don't know if we'll have the same one, but we'll go around the horn. Sean, why don't we start with you?
Mine is the end of the episode, where is it Aerion Targaryen? Is that how you pronounce it?
I believe so.
Why don't we just call him Dickhead Targaryen, like a bunch of them?
I was about to say that's typical for a Targaryen. You got to be more specific.
I mean, I quite like a lot of the Targaryens, but this guy I have no love for. Although I didn't mind his dad. I'll call him Raven Targaryen. I think it's actually Maekar Targaryen or Makar Targaryen. So obviously the end moment, he's breaking the girl's fingers there. Dunk steps in. That whole sequence was, tense and emotional, tension-filled. But because I've not read the novella, obviously if you've watched Game of Thrones, you have some idea who Dunk and Egg are and what their history is. I don't think you should be shocked when these two characters don't die in the show, people. If you are, then you didn't watch Game of Thrones. But I wasn't aware we were going to solve the mystery, at least for the characters on screen, of who Egg was right away. Like, obviously we all knew. But Dunk didn't know. Dunk had no idea. I thought that was something that would be like end of the season, maybe even drag into next season. So when it happened right here in this episode and the way it happened, I was like, oh, that was incredibly well executed, and at least for me, unexpected at this point. Not the result. Again, we knew the result, but just the way they went about it. I thought that whole sequence was incredibly well handled. It was shot very much like one of the tension-filled Game of Thrones sequences. They did a really, really good job of that.
Brandy, what about you? What do you think of the ending?
No, I really enjoyed it, and I felt like like you said, it was a great table setter for the rest of the season. It was good to see just how chivalrous and noble Dunk really is. I mean, we knew he was a good guy. We knew he was a different type of individual in terms of just Westeros in general, and we got to see it on display, like just how he feels, how the virtue, everything, going to a damsel's distress and trying to save her. And the fact that it took as many men as it did just to subdue him, I was waiting for him to just start throwing guys off left and right and keep it going. But yeah, it was a great for being a brief action piece to some degree, even though it was filled with emotion and tension and building up to obviously the reveal we got, which was very well done. It really just kind of showcased Duncan, what we knew he was. It showcased the prince, how much of a prick we knew he was. And we finally got to Egg finally started, being more involved in the storyline. And we know he's going to be even more involved moving forward, which is something, obviously, I said last week, I want more moments with him. And this was definitely a big, huge moment for him in this episode.
It was definitely, like I said, I used the table setter phrase earlier specifically because of this sequence. It was great. You got to see you hit it on the head talking about all of the different elements to it that we saw through Dunk and Egg as well. Like that intensity of Dunk, you got to see, why he is going to become a force in Westeros. That intensity, like it was very almost mountain-esque in its intensity, and I like that. Seeing a character with sort of that ability on the good side, is a nice change of pace for Game of Thrones, where usually those guys, are the bad guys, and it's nice seeing that, and seeing, like you said, the chivalry, the actual actions of a knight, in doing the right thing, the good thing, the honorable thing, and standing up to a prince of the realm like that, no matter how you spice that, it's a thing that involves a great amount of courage. Like that's, you're not just standing up to a random lord, to a random highborn or anything like that. This is a prince of the realm. That is, that's a guy you don't stand up to and expect things to come out smelling like roses, as you clearly saw progress through that. And finally seeing, Egg step out of his shell, pun not intended, was a huge moment. Like to this point in the series, he's been the quiet one. He's the soft one. He's the, you saw it in a scene earlier, where you saw sort of his ideal life that he wants for himself, and it's the exact opposite of King's Landing. So, to see him step up in that moment and out himself, and basically sort of take the ability to be the quiet squire away, from himself, was huge. It was momentous, and I think they built up nicely to it throughout the course of the episode, and getting there, I think, was great. And it was a great moment, all the way wrapped around. It was shot really well. Visually, I think it came across well, which for a nighttime dark sequence is sometimes in this era of television a hard thing to do, where they like to play with their darks and shadows. They didn't do that so much here, and it was very, well lit and easy on the eyes, despite being a darker sequence. So I think that was a great choice for, the first one to talk about. Randy, what about you? What do you want to showcase from this episode?
So let's thinking about it, because obviously being a short episode, I'm just going to look at the progression for Egg through the episode, because you think about seeing him start working with the horse, and then recognizing a knight who actually played in the games, but then of course you see the character development and the chemistry building and the friendship kind of starting to bloom between Egg and Duncan. But then of course you have your little one-offs where you see how Egg reacts to his brother and the joust, and basically screaming, "Kill him!" Like, I'm just like going, yeah, he pretty much does not want to be found just yet. And then, of course, you get that little brief encounter with the, I would assume, a fortune teller, gypsy, whatever you want to call her, and the look on his face when he's like, what did you mean? What does she mean by that? And it's just like, you put two and two together and you're just like, sorry, kid, your future isn't as bright as you'd hoped it would be. But it's, and then obviously leading up to him having to show the courage to protect Duncan. And I think, like I said, just everything you saw, just from the character development, just how they were developing their friendship, to just him working through different scenes of just showing different parts of his personality, and we finally get to see just that momentous occasion at the end. I think that really played well throughout the entire episode. I mean, it's hard to pick one real big scene, because again, it's 30 minutes, maybe less depending on the credits. You can only go but so far with it.
Sean, any thoughts on that?
I think the way Egg was handled in the episode was very well. I think the kid whose name I always forget, he's doing a wonderful job with the role. He's believable. Dexter. Jade says his name's Dexter. I have no idea the validity of that or not, but we'll go with what she said. He's real good. He's believable. Look, we've said it before in some of the other projects we've covered on this channel. Child actors are under an unbelievable amount of criticism. But that's the industry. You know, I don't think I'd ever want my kids being actors, not at a young age, that's for damn sure. And to see what he's been given, which, when you really think about it, hasn't been a lot through 3 episodes. He probably had more in this episode than he's had in any of the episodes. It's been fun, and I think he's been good, and he's been believable. And the progression from where he starts in this episode to the scene we just talked about is, the scene that I brought up is, from acting like the innocent kid who doesn't necessarily know everything, to, yeah, fuck that shit, I'm a prince and you won't touch him, is something else. So, like, kudos to everybody on board who wanted this kid cast. He fits the role very well. Not that I know the source material, I don't, but I'm enjoying the performance.
Just confirming, Jade is correct. His name is Dexter. His name is Dexter Ansel. But yeah, I mean, this is tied in. It's going to sort of segue into my moment in this episode, which is, them on the hill, overlooking the shanty town and having, that conversation about their future and, what they would like it to be, and, going on missions and running a farm and raising animals and all those things that Egg wants for his future is so blatantly different to what we sort of hear from the soothsayer, which is something I think we should touch on here in a minute. It was so poignant seeing, the future he envisioned for himself. The humbleness of him, that, when he gets to the point of going on a great mission for their Lord and coming back successfully and getting the second prettiest daughter, because the first one obviously goes to Dunk, is just so, it's such a great moment for a character that, if you know the material, he's obviously destined for so much more. And it's so, like you said, you hit the nail on the head there, Sean, when you talked about, the pressure on child actors in, the legacy franchises like this one, is intense. The lights shine bright, and, I'd say he's nailed it out of the head. And you're definitely right when you say that this episode featured the most meat on the bone for Egg. That's for sure. From the scene on the hill all the way through to the ending, there was a lot of Egg in this episode, and you got to see it, and it just, for me, like, just having that moment, and the chemistry I think shone through so brightly. Even like we've seen the chemistry throughout the first two episodes, but like to me, that scene on the hill with them overlooking everything, just the chemistry just shone through in such a beautifully poignant way that it's a testament to the chemistry of them and the chemistry and the writing and the performances that you can see it. And I think it was just such a beautiful sequence of events. Randy?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you guys 100%. This kid has definitely, uh, given this episode, this kid's really brought this character to life very well, considering what little he had episodes 1 and 2. And then episode 3, you're just like, okay, Egg has finally arrived. And yeah, I really am looking forward to seeing how much more growth we're going to get out of him in 3 episodes. Because how can you not pretty much showcase him in every episode moving forward, like literally giving him equal amounts of screen time with him and Dunk? I mean, that's pretty impressive. The fact that he goes from kind of, even though we know he is essentially a main character in the novella, to go from kind of like having like just being a side character, and then now he's just full blown main character in 1 episode, just through his actions alone. It's really it was really really great to see.
Is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I do want to bring up one more point before we move on. Actually, you know what? No, sorry, I have it as a different topic on here. I forgot. We're good.
Okay then. Before we move forward and get to the next part of this, I would be remiss if we didn't talk about the soothsayer. That was extremely point, like it, and you can sort of like the characters because they're mentioned in Game of Thrones proper, but you don't know the stories or anything. So I'm not going to add much to this topic because I do know the destination. So we'll leave that plot notwithstanding. Say like what, Randy? Have you read the novella? Do you know the material, or are you like Sean and haven't read it either?
So kind of like, see, I don't know the material. Just saying, I'm the type of person that if there's a visual property, so like whether it comes to movies or TV series, I like to get through the series first and then go back and read, just so I can like fill in the gaps sort of thing and see what's different, what's the same. So I did it with Harry Potter. I'm doing that. I haven't started Game of Thrones yet, but it's like I know that there's probably a lot that was my friends have told me there's a lot in there that's not in the series that's different. So I look forward to doing that. And obviously once this season's done, I mean, since it's a novella, I'll probably pick it up and read through it then.
Okay,
I
so
should
you
also
guys,
clarify that I know like what happens in their lives, especially much further down the road. But if you were to ask me specifically exactly what happens at this tournament, no, I don't know the specifics.
okay, so from the three of you guys, not knowing everything that's said, what do you take away from the soothsayer? Like, obviously we heard everything she said, and we can make our own inferences from that. Me, knowing where the story goes, understand the whole thing through, but not knowing the trip and the destination, what do you guys think about everything she said?
To my knowledge, most of what she said is true from a certain point of view.
Randy, did you infer anything more than that, or because it seemed like, Sean, you know the destination, so you know the historical facts towards the end. So
Yeah.
Randy, what about you? You know nothing about this. You've only heard her prediction of their future. What do you infer from hearing her words?
See, so if I had been left in the dark about Egg, I probably would have been like, "Oh wow, that's kind of cool. Why are you freaking out about that?" But then, of course, obviously, basically saying he's going to die and they're going to cheer for it. But it's just because of like episodes and stuff that Zach has said through as we've reviewed, it's understand. I'm like, well, yeah, it makes sense why she said what she said. Uh, but we haven't really talked about Dunk, but so much. So I'm kind of really curious to see how he gets to that point. But for Egg, it's just like, yeah, sorry, kid, your future doesn't look too happy for you. But I mean, hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully it's not hopefully it's not anything taken face value. It's just more or less, prophecy can always be uh, misread or misunderstood in many different ways. We've seen it, and that's kind of like the old chestnut in just about any type of hero's journey for any franchise. So I have a feeling that even though I'm taking it as face value, I'm sure there's more to it, that there's some nuances that I just don't understand yet.
Yeah, for sure. I don't feel like I'm crossing a line when I say this because I don't think the showrunner and George R. R. Martin's dim-witted, naive plan for let's fucking do these 3 seasons and then we'll come back to the show every 10 years. People, it ain't gonna fucking happen. Let's just be perfectly fucking clear about that. This is not the show you do that with. If anything, you do that with the main show and you come back 10 years after it finishes or 15 years after it finishes. You don't do that with this particular thing. Um, there's a lot left out of Egg's portion of what she's saying where the wrong conclusion can be taken from that.
Absolutely.
True,
right,
like I said, but from a certain point of view.
No, absolutely. Using that terminology, which we tend to most closely associate with Star Wars, is absolutely effective in this. And I can knowing the material, can certainly agree with that. Hearing it and knowing the truth of events, there's a lot of shadow on this prediction that I like. That gives you room to play in down the road. So let's move forward, and it's still very early in this. We're only 3 episodes in of 6, and at the end of this, we're likely only to have somewhere around less than 24 episodes of this, probably, when we're all said and done. But when we compare materials that we have to the product we've gotten, obviously this is based off the novella, and House of the Dragon is the history of the Targaryen book that George published. Game of Thrones is, of course, A Song of Ice and Fire. But how do you feel?
Have that history book? It's worth picking up.
Yep. So how do you feel the effectiveness of this series versus the source material when compared to the other shows in this canon? Who wants to go first?
I'd say this, and I'll keep mine short. Again, haven't read the novella, but I know the basis of the source material for House of the Dragon, at least where we are currently at the story and how accurate the show follows it or not accurate. And same with Game of Thrones, where Andy made reference to there's different things in there. With Game of Thrones, it's a little bit of both ways, where it's like actually a lot of both ways, where there's a lot that happens in the show, not even just in like season 6, 7, and 8, that doesn't happen in the novels, and vice versa. So I have no doubt when everyone says this is the most accurate to the source material that it is. I also think that, well, I'll say those thoughts, but yeah, Knights of the Seven Kingdom, or A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms rather, does feel the closest to what George wrote, but I don't necessarily think that's for the best.
Okay. Randy, what about you?
So obviously, with not reading any of the source material, this feels different. This is very different compared to what we got for House of the Dragon, very different from Game of Thrones, which is good. So, that's the one thing that it always felt like with either show is that it was there's even though there were doom and gloom, lots of sex, doom and gloom, maybe a little bit of happiness, doom and gloom, and people dying, everybody dying. I mean, it's that's kind of like that's the feeling I get with that. Whereas, like, paying attention to this, there's a lightheartedness to it. You actually have a true, genuine, virtuous person that normally that you've never seen exist before in Westeros, and it's a breath of fresh air. Now, granted, it's not going to be for everybody, because when anybody thinks Game of Thrones, they always have that preconceived notion of, you know, blood, guts, gore, and all that goes with it. Whereas, yeah, we're still getting some of that here, but a lot of lighthearted moments, a lot of character growth for something that's supposed to be really short. That's really I'm liking it, but it's confusing, because does that mean now that we're going to get these next 3 episodes, are they just going to be like a downhill slide where it's just going to be, exposition is going to be basically at a premium, and it's just going to be nothing but action as we race to the end of the season? I'm a little concerned that there's going to be a very different vibe in the second half, which is not a bad thing, but it's just I'm still getting used to the characters, and that's why I think this is, even though it's working and it's doing well, I don't know how successful it's going to be in the sense of making me really care about these characters, like I would say with Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon, because those characters had time to breathe. Those characters had time to really develop. We've got to see the range of emotions for everybody in both of those series. This is more like, now we're at a fever pitch to see what happens at the end of this tournament, which means 3 episodes. That's it. 3 episodes of maybe 30 minutes. And yeah, I'm hoping by the end, I do care enough about these characters that I'm going to be excited for another season, unfortunately. And so I don't know how well that's going to work, though.
Well, not to be the bearer of bad news, but to my understanding, especially while seeing the preview for episode 4, I would say it's more episodes 5 and 6 that are going to be like that, rather than 4, 5, and 6.
I mean, we'll see, as we get down towards the end here. But like for me, I think if you've watched this, if you've watched us in all of our iterations, you know that I am a stickler for, if you're going to adapt source material, adapt source material. It's one of my bugaboos. If you want to do original stories with characters from source material, fine. But if you're going to adapt something that is actually published and been written and all of that, then adapt the source material. And I think as far as the 3 goes, now obviously this is a much smaller sample size, obviously, but this is also a much smaller source. And I think to this point, they're walking a very fine line of that, in that this is both, it has both the greatest potential and for both success and failure. Because it is a novella, there is so much less that you need to adapt, which is why you need to stay true to those things that exist within it, right? Like, this isn't a 500-page novel you're trying to adapt. It is a short novella. So as long as they can continue staying true to those events, and obviously, with 3 episodes in, we've hardly seen any of those events yet, but the tables are setting in such a way that we are going to see them, and they are going to stay true to it and add spice on the outside and flesh it out. And I think there's a lot of great potential here. Obviously with Game of Thrones, they left a lot out, not just from, and like Sean said, people point to those last few seasons when they got past the books. Even before that, they left a lot of things out. There were, as far back as I think episode 1, season 1, characters' names were changed and characters were truncated into other characters, and they were amalgamated and changed, and it went all the way back to the very first episode. So it wasn't a new thing when you get towards the end and all of a sudden you're creating things out of whole cloth because you had to. The books didn't go that far, and you had to end the series somehow. House of the Dragon, they've definitely there's less than Game of Thrones, but they have veered off in more meaningful ways, I think. Changing timelines and events and things of that nature around is just, I don't know. I'm hopeful that this one stays on the path that it's on and continues the way that it's going. Because like I said, there is less for them to adapt, which helps, from an original standpoint, them filling it out, that as long as they hit on the events of the novella and carry that forward, I think this definitely has the chance to be the most effective series as far as that goes. All right, so let's move the train forward here. As always, we've got the triple shot of questions we ask about every episode when we review an episode. We'll start with the first one, obviously. Favorite scene of the episode. Randy, we'll start with you.
I think it's pretty obvious, and I'm pretty sure I would think that all three of us might feel this way, but I feel like the way they ended it was probably my favorite scene, just because of the amount of tension. Even though we know that some of these characters have plot armor, still the tension was there. It was well acted. The setting was done really well, and the lighting was great, but everybody came across as a unique individual. Instead of it's just like same people all kind of drowning in the background, everybody had a moment that they nailed beautifully, and it just really put a great emphasis on the end, and I'm going, oh shit, second half of this season is going to be hopefully amazeballs. And that's kind of got the feeling I got from that scene.
Sean?
It's the end scene. I'd say the end scene is probably my second favorite scene so far in the 3 episodes.
Yeah, I mean, you're not going to get any disagreement from me on this one. The end sequence is far and away the best sequence and my favorite of the entire episode. Arns, let's move to the next question. Obviously, we did favorite scene. So, favorite character within this episode. Sean, we'll start with you.
This is Egg's moment to shine. He's the one that sort of takes the crown and wears it, pun intended.
Yeah, you're not going to find a point of disagreement with me. I agree wholeheartedly. Egg was the star of this episode all the way through. We talked about the scene on the hill earlier, him dealing with, him whittling in the tree while, Dunk pukes behind him. Everything that Egg did in this episode, I think, was great. Randy, is it a clean sweep?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like I'd said, because you look at it, you started with Egg, you ended with Egg, and we got to see the range the character had, but also we got to see a lot of growth in that character, and he finally sidesteps the side character, and he's full-fledged, in-your-face main character now. So yeah, he definitely is my favorite character of this one.
All right, guys. We've done the first 2 questions, so let's finish it out and score it. We don't have a ridiculous scale for this one. I'm thankful for that. So we just rank it out of numbers. So out of 10, episode 3, what do we got? Randy?
So as I had said, this definitely was a step up for me from the previous episode. I felt like things moved along at a better clip, and we got a lot of good character development and we had some really great scenes that are going to be very memorable when you look back on this particular episode of the season. So because of that, I'm going to give it an 8.2 because it's definitely been my favorite episode so far of the season, and I feel like it's been the best episode so far of the season.
Sean?
I want to give this episode something high, but I believe to achieve a high mark, the whole episode needs to be high quality, and I stand by the first probably 12 minutes or so of this episode just feels like mostly filler, which is unfortunate. I'm giving it a 7.2. If I was judging just the back half of the episode and the score doesn't count for anything but in my head, well over an 8. Unfortunately, we don't score the episodes that way. So that's what it gets.
That's fair. For me, I think I'm gonna come in at around a 7.6. I think that's where I was at with the premiere. And while like I said, I think this is the best episode. I think it's just fractionally better, not so much a leaps and bounds better. I think we're gonna take a big step forward next week with that episode, but we shall see. All right, guys. Final thoughts. Do either of you have anything you want to add about this episode that we didn't cover throughout?
I pretty much said everything that I've thought about the episode. Obviously, there are probably some little things here and there that we didn't really touch on, just like watching the whole jousting scene and kind of getting to know just how much of a prick the prince really is, considering he intentionally killed a horse.
What are you talking about? It was an accident.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, about as accidental as Dunk shit in the first episode.
Especially when you see Dunk understands, like, hey, he's aiming low, and he knew it was going to happen. So it's like you get that feeling that it's going to be if I don't know how it's going to play out, but honestly, if the prince dies, it's going to be very satisfying by the end. That's all I'm going to say. At least getting his ass kicked, that's kind of what I'm hoping for. But if he dies, just got to go Ivan Drago. If he dies, he dies.
Fair enough. Sean, anything you wanted to add that we didn't get to earlier?
It's not really on the episode, but just the series in general. It's worth watching. It's a worthwhile entry into the Westeros TV universe, galaxy, whatever. But there are some areas where it's falling significantly short of Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon. And one's technical, and the other one I think is just far too important to a lot of the things that we talk about on this channel. The technical side is the editing is a little more clunky than what you see in the other two shows. And, sometimes it's just like, it's not really holding up quality-wise with what we're used to. And then the other one that just screams at you is the score. It's just nowhere near as effective as Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon. It lacks severely. It was one of our big complaints when we still have 3 more episodes to go through in our watch-through series of Kenobi, but the Kenobi score, there are elements that are decent with the score, but we're not used to Star Wars scores being decent. Well, I'm not used to Westeros TV just being decent. They're usually significantly better, and I feel like it's one area it really lacks in.
I mean, that's fair. I think for me, I think some of those things will come through at the end. Once we get through all 6 episodes, I'll probably watch them all through. But no, I agree. I shouldn't say I agree. I should say I can't disagree with anything you said. Because I haven't sort of watched it with that critical eye yet. I like to sort of give the first pass, and then I'll watch with the critical eye the second time through. So, all right, guys, that is going to do it for tonight's episode. I'd say we ran a little on the shorter side tonight, but that's all right. It's a shorter episode, and we didn't have a whole bunch of news to pack on and add on as well. So, we were longer than the episode we talked about. So that's a positive for us, I guess. Randy, tell them where they can find you.
So over on X, you can find me at Katie Giles. Also, actually recorded last night a new episode of the Sports Brew. My friend says he's mixing down right now and should be up later. So if you're interested in basically people just going off the rails, talking bullshit and sports and drinking and having a lot of fun, just Google Sports and Brew and you find it no problem.
Sean?
Just a big shout out to those that still support us on Patreon and our channel sponsors as well. They know who they are. There's going to be an updated list next week. Unfortunately, it's not in the description because Restream sucks. I don't advise anybody get it unless it's all you can afford. Yeah, I think that's. Next week we'll probably have. I'm guessing it'll be more than just a TV spot come Monday morning. So I think we'll probably be talking about the Seven Kingdoms episode 4, which by the way airs on Friday. Even though I probably won't get a chance to watch it until Sunday.
I don't know if it does here. They haven't updated the listing yet.
Well, either way, I won't get a chance to see it till Sunday. So, busy weekend for me. It has nothing to do with the Super Bowl that I couldn't be less interested in. But probably a Mandalorian and Grogu trailer by then too, and not just like an extended thing from the thing we already got. It sounds like basically completely new stuff. So hopefully they sell the movie a little better than what they have so far. Speaking of which, I can say that we started to, and by we I mean I started to lay some of the groundwork for what will be our Mandalorian and Grogu opening night review. We almost always do that with a Star Wars release or a Halloween release. We do something opening night. The catch is I have my kid's soccer game that day, and I live an hour and a half away from where I'm going to have to go see the movie. So it's going to happen, but it's going to have some twists and curves to it, and I need to get with Johnny, and hopefully Randy can see it opening night too, and we'll figure that one out. I'd say we have all the time in the world, but guess what? Fellas, it's February already, and movie comes out in May.
It is definitely...
Yeah, don't remind me that 2026 is trying to already be done and over with at this point.
Right? Somehow the first month is gone.
All right, and as always, you can find me here, there, and everywhere. So for everyone watching, we say thanks. For everyone watching later, we say thanks. To our patrons, we say thanks. To everyone else, why aren't you watching? Huh? Why aren't you watching? You should be watching this. Great stuff here. We'll see you next week when we return for episode 4 of Night of the Seven Kingdoms and any other entertainment things that happen to come out and drop at the Super Bowl this Sunday. So for all of us here at the channel, for all of us here at House of the Empire, we thank you. We say good.